Patrick sat in his favorite chair, the same one he'd been sitting in for the past 5 years. It was a Christmas present from his ex-wife. Who gives a recliner as a Christmas present? But she knew him well. She knew him well enough to realize that this chair would be the perfect gift for him, even if it was a silly gift for someone else. It was so comfortable, like it had been made especially for him. The cup holders were perfect for holding whatever he was drinking. The Bluetooth speakers on either side of the headrest made him feel like he was bathing in sound. And many nights in a row he fell asleep on it with his feet up. This chair was the only thing he had left from his past life. His daughter lived with her in the house he was kicked out of, living with the dog he had bought her as a Christmas present. A dog that was mostly walked, bathed, and fed by him. All she did was cuddle him to her. He sighed. His first Christmas alone, just him and his chair. His cell phone rang. When he saw who was calling him, a perplexed expression appeared on his face. Throwing a quick glance at the clock on the opposite wall, he saw the final minutes of the longest Christmas Eve he had ever experienced. Should he even answer it? He could just let the call go to voicemail. But a curious, masochistic part of him was drawn to the call. It was the kind of scab that was impossible not to pick. "Hi, Kendra," he said, picking up the phone. "Hi, Patty." She still had the same sadness in her voice that she'd always had lately when they'd talked, and yet it was mixed with the sweetness he'd always known. For a moment there was silence between them, but it was not empty. It was filled with 15 years of memories, both happy and sad. Patrick finally interrupted it with words. "I honestly didn't expect to hear from you this year." "Why not?" she asked quietly. "We promised to always be the first to wish each other Merry Christmas, no matter what. Do you remember?" He grinned at that. "Because keeping promises is your business, right?" "Patrick." "You're right. My fault. The water under the bridge." They paused again, giving her a chance to accept his apology. This time she spoke first. "So, do you have any plans for tomorrow?" "Not really, other than to give Jessie her present when you bring her over tomorrow and have dinner at my parents' house. What about you?" "Nothing, really," she said, even though they both knew it was a lie. Patrick thought about leaving it unanswered, but he couldn't help himself. Those damn scabs. "So you're not doing anything about what's his name?" She sighed. Hearing him mention her boyfriend, even though he didn't give his name, was like pouring a bucket of ice water on her. "You mean Sean?" she asked, completing his tactical throw at her. "Yes, Sean," he tried, but couldn't hide the bitterness in his voice. Just saying that asshole's name made him need a heartburn pill. Patrick couldn't help but relive the moment all over again. In fact, it was more than a moment. An entire hour had passed. A whole hour of reading those fucking texts and detailing her 2-year affair. Each one ripped more and more chunks out of his heart. By the end, all that was left was an empty hole in the middle of his chest. Kendra sighed sadly. "Well, if you must know, we're going to his parents' house when we drop Jessie off." How original. A tear rolled down Kendra's cheek. Patrick couldn't see it, of course. Not from his side of the phone. Though he probably wouldn't have noticed either if she'd been standing right in front of him. He was busy feeling his own confusion. Pouncing on him, Kendra spat out, "I don't know why you're so angry. You don't care either way. After all, you're the one who dumped me, remember?" That only made him laugh out loud. The way she always managed to turn everything upside down was her gift. If she had a superpower, it would be projecting her subjective experiences onto other people. And not that astral projection, which would actually be a cool power. No, hers was just good old-fashioned projection, not taking responsibility for anything. "What's so funny?" she asked angrily. "Why don't you ever take me seriously?" "Because you're full of shit, Kendra. That's why." "I'm full of shit? I'm full of shit?" "Yes," he said, still sounding a little surprised. "I'm the one who dumped you?" "Really?" "So, the 2-year affair had nothing to do with it? All those times you sat next to me, watched movies with me, but texting him had nothing to do with it? That fucking 3-day weekend that you, flew out to take care of your sick mother. I get it! She shouted in his ear, interrupting his tirade. She was right to do so because he had plenty more ammunition. Really, Kendra? Did you really get it? By this time, her voice had reached tears. Her next breath came out choppy, as if she was fighting a scream. Yes, I did realize. I screwed up, Patty. I screwed up big time. I was selfish. I took you for granted. I ruined our family. I get it. Every morning I wake up with a daughter who hates me. I walk through a house that feels empty without you. And every night when I go to bed, all I can think about is, no, you fucking don't you dare. No matter how hard Patrick tried to keep his composure, those walls were crumbling. Why couldn't he keep his cool? Why could she still drive him to this state? I dare not. What, Patty? Tell the truth? Why not? You can't handle the truth? She hoped he would grin or chuckle or at least thaw. The movie A Few Good Men was their favorite. They discovered this little tidbit on their first date, made love until the end credits on their second. But that didn't melt him. Quite the opposite. All it did for Patrick was reiterate how much she'd thrown away for some jerk she'd met online. He coldly shot her another look. I'm perfectly fine with the truth. It just sucks when I have to ferret it out because all my wife does is lie to me. Ouch. That broke her. She couldn't hold back the sobs any longer. A sob broke out, and then another. Patrick couldn't help but feel for her. Without sympathizing with her, he felt for her. Even after a year of separation, his heart still beat in the same rhythm as hers. He could picture her there, in the living room they had once shared together. Right now, she was in that old, worn robe she loved so much because it was comfortable and reminded her of her mother. That robe covered her boxers and t-shirt. It was another funny personal joke between them. Whenever he had to go out of town for work, she wore his boxers to bed. It was his way of always keeping Pussy safe. I bet when she spent that weekend with the asshole, she wasn't wearing his boxers. He probably wasn't wearing any clothes at all. I'm so sorry, Patty, she said between sobs. How many times do I have to say this? How long will it take for you to finally forgive me? He said sadly, I'll forgive you when I finally stop loving you, Kendra. Because maybe then the pain will go away. Maybe then the fucking hole in my chest will go away. Maybe I'll be able to get some sleep without seeing that message where you wrote that you loved him. Maybe. Now it was Patrick's turn. His pain could no longer be contained. A sob, louder than hers, burst from him. He brought his hand up to his eyes as if it could serve as a dam for tears. Kendra's heart ached with him. She wanted to wrap her arms around him, kiss his forehead, and hold him to her chest as his tears wet her shirt. Patty! For heaven's sake, stop calling me that! He suddenly roared into the receiver. She shut up. She had to remember that she couldn't comfort him since she had hurt him herself. It sucked so much, but that was the way it was. That was their reality. Patrick, she said cautiously, how long are you going to torture us? Can't you see that you're not just punishing me? You're punishing Jesse and torturing yourself. I know you're mad at me. I get it. That's the way it has to be, but that's why we need marriage counseling. Maybe if we... Interrupting her, his voice was strangely calm when he said, But you're with him, Kendra. She was momentarily silent. I mean, you just said you were going to meet his parents, right? That's a milestone in any relationship. How long after we broke up did you wait until you ran to him? A week? A month? He paused, and she didn't bother to fill the silence because they both knew she went to see him the very next night. She'd dropped Jesse off at his place because she wanted him to spend time with his daughter. She even made some long, sanctimonious speech congratulating herself for not being one of those heartless bitches who keep a child away from her father. Continuing, he said, I don't understand you. I can't understand how, after all we've been through, you could think so little of us and so little about me. We've been married 12 years. We both have a 9-year-old daughter. You were by my side at my brother's funeral when he was shot in the line of duty. You hugged me and cried with me. And I was at your mother's funeral when she finally passed away from cancer. After all of this, you not only cheat on me, but you run to him, barely drying the ink on our separation agreement. And now you're calling me and talking about some family counseling? Screw you, Kendra! Kendra shrieked again. This time had a different effect on Patrick than the last. Yes, Kendra was selfish. She always had been. The fact that Patrick loved her more than she loved him wasn't much of a secret. That didn't mean she didn't love him. No, she did. But the driving force behind their marriage had always been happy wife equals happy life. The two of them didn't even realize it. That is, until it was too late. Patrick was raised to care for his wife more than anyone else. He took pride in being good. He never cheated on his wife. He never raised a hand to her. If they argued, he was quick to apologize, even if he wasn't wrong. After all, if he hurt her feelings, that was enough. Was this the wrong behavior for a man in a marriage? No. Every man should treat his wife as if she was the only woman in the world. But what Patrick failed to do was create balance. He failed to prioritize his desires and feelings. If she wanted something, and it was within reason and budget, she got it. Whatever he wanted, he always gave in. Seeing that smile was payment enough for what he was giving up. But when one person's desires are always sidelined, something happens. It becomes normal. It becomes as if that's the way it should be. If something different happens, it is considered abnormal and therefore wrong. When his brother died, Kendra was by his side. She was at the funeral, cried with him, and genuinely sympathized with her husband. After all, that's what a good wife does. But he had reached a level of depression that she couldn't understand, especially when her own mom died of cancer. It had sucked. She was grieving. She missed her mom every day, but she moved one foot in front of the other and kept going. But there's a difference between someone who dies slowly and someone who is snatched away suddenly. And dying for something you do a little more than just your job. His brother was a cop. He pulled a woman out of a burning car and didn't leave her side until he was sure she was okay. He saved a mother beaten to a pulp by her husband, and on top of that, he drove Sally, his neighbor, to work every day in his patrol car because she was constantly being chased by some young thug who had a soft spot for her. And he got killed for pulling the guy over because his taillight wasn't on. If his brother could die after doing so much good in this world, what chance did he have? He was a nobody, someone who ran an office. The biggest good he had done for the world was recycling. It shook Patrick's world to the core. His brother's death was more than just his brother's death. When he looked into that coffin, he saw himself. If any of them should be dead, it should be him, not a hero to so many people. If anyone needed time on the therapist's couch, it was Patrick. But he refused therapy. He just floundered in his depression, crying silently with the tears of his soul. Kendra didn't understand. Couldn't. He wouldn't talk to her. What he needed from her was something he didn't even realize he needed. He didn't need her to pull him out of this state. He didn't need her to make him feel better or offer him a magical solution to overcome the guilt of staying alive. He just needed her to be there for him. He needed her to stay with him, even when it wasn't possible. But the relationship he'd built early on made his feelings less important. He took a seat in the seat behind her. He was sad, mournful, depressed, and contemplating his own mortality. But he'd been doing it for too long. He needed to come to his senses. Here he had a family who loved him, and that alone should be enough to bring him out of this state. But it wasn't. He needed more than that. He needed to be put first. He needed this time to be all about him. The more upset she got, the more he pulled away. The more he pulled away. You get the picture. And then Sean showed up. She met him in a chat room. No, this wasn't some innocent chat room where people exchanged recipes and tips for do-it-yourself projects. She went looking for confirmation that she was still attractive, that she was still worth looking at. And she got it. Of course, she wasn't going to cheat. Just a few flirty personal texts, maybe a couple pictures. "Wow, you're beautiful," he texted her. The picture she sent wasn't even that flattering, but he praised her like she was strutting down the runway in the latest issue of Victoria's Secret. From that point on, it's been business as usual. Little flare-ups, more photos, more confirmations, then a bikini picture, giggles, more photos, this time a little more candid. But that was just the beginning. Honestly, if it was just that, she could have rolled over at any time. But it was those phone calls that had her hooked. Those intimate moments she'd stolen from her day to hear his voice, his laugh, his breath. He was no longer a soulless online flirt. He was a real person, a funny, sensitive man who enjoyed listening to her. He always made her laugh. And when she complained about her husband, he was always there to listen and make her feel better. He put her first, just like Patrick used to do. This last 3-day weekend, a lie to end all lies, had been the last breath of her marriage. He knew her mother had cancer. When Kendra suddenly had to visit her, he assumed the worst. Feeling his wife's pain, or at least the pain she should have had, made him snap out of his moping, even if only temporarily. He felt that she needed him. So he tried at the last minute to buy 2 plane tickets to meet her there. He and Jessie were going to be there for her in her time of need, but she had told him not to. She was adamant about that. In fact, she said the strangest thing, namely, "This is something I need to do alone." Who wants to go through this alone? Who wouldn't want their spouse there with them, even if just for moral support? But later, when her mom died, did she need him for that? That was the beginning of his suspicions. He began to pay more attention to her phone activity, the way it went everywhere with her, including the bathroom, the way she was putting the phone face down, the way she would turn it slightly away from him when she was texting, or the way she sometimes left the room when the phone rang. And then, one day, she'd left it at home by mistake. Curious, he'd tried to open it, only to find that she'd changed her password since their anniversary. Previously, it had been her 4-digit code for most PINs, her debit and credit cards, her banking information, her voicemail, but not anymore. And then, as she rushed back in panic to retrieve it, the alarm bells rang loudly. The look in her eyes, the fear was almost a confession in itself, but he needed proof. So he watched her closely, pretending not to notice anything. He watched until one day he saw her unlock it. The new code was 4 digits that didn't match anything he knew, so he had to repeat it to himself over and over to memorize it. He would later find out that it was Sean's birthday. Patrick looked at the clock on the wall. It was 12:15. It was officially Christmas. "Well, it's Christmas already, Kendra," he said, feeling incredibly drained after such a short conversation. She sniffed her nose. "Yes, I guess it is." Both seemed reluctant to end the conversation. It was actually a metaphor for everything else. That's why they were still apart, but neither of them had filed for divorce yet. Even with the fact that she was going to meet Sean's parents today, she couldn't bring herself to file. Part of her, even though it was a drawn-out thing, was hoping for a Christmas miracle. She hoped he would tell her he couldn't live without her and that he was coming home to her. If Patrick did that, she would gladly cut Sean out of her life. Unfortunately, what she didn't realize was that it was that very train of thought that kept her from making a Christmas miracle happen. What she failed to realize was that the more she refused to put him first, the more he drifted away from her. They were at an impasse. Patrick still loved his wife, no matter how much he struggled with that love. Her infidelity still hurt, but it no longer incapacitated him as it once had. Once, every waking moment had been consumed by her and those texts. But lately, he found himself spending days without thinking about it, today being an exception. Soon it would be weeks. And then she'll just be the mother of his child, someone he once knew. This purgatory won't last forever. "Merry Christmas, Kendra," Patrick said. "And you know what? He really thought so." "I hope you find what you're looking for." She sighed sadly. She wouldn't get her Christmas miracle, not this year, maybe next year. Merry Christmas, Patrick. She swallowed the words. I love you. She knew he wouldn't say the same back to her, even if he felt it. She missed those words flying off his lips. No matter how many times Sean repeated them, it didn't compare. Patrick had been her first love, her best friend, her soulmate. This was truly her loss. The click of the call ending made Kendra break down again. What she wouldn't give to go back in time 5 Christmases ago to the time she'd given him that chair.